Welcome back to Blender Frenzy. I am Justin, and I have been putting out videos recently about how to speed up your video editing workflow with keyboard shortcuts if you use Blender as a video editor. But there's another way that you can actually speed up your video editing workflow in Blender, and that is by the use of proxies. So what is a proxy? Well, in short, it is a substitute video that's a copy of yours, but it's transcoded in a way that is specifically designed for real-time video editing. And that's just for your editing. So you edit it using the proxy, and then when you go to render it out, it will render out the original full quality video. And to see why you might want to do that, let's talk a little bit about how Blender caches images in. So I have this video here, this video strip and this audio strip. I'm actually going to get rid of the audio strip because cache and proxies only apply to video strips. But this is from my recent Frenzy Freebies promo that I did. And if I take the playhead here, click and drag and move, you can see that that playhead has a hard time following my mouse. So if I move that really fast, you can see it's struggling to keep up. Now this is going to be video specific, so not all videos are this slow. Blender handles some video and video files better and some it doesn't. And this is a case-by-case basis. It all depends on how the video was made, how it was transcoded, what container it is. But I use OBS Studio to record all of my tutorials, so whatever it is, Blender doesn't like it very much. And it makes it very slow and very painful to edit without a proxy. And the reason it's so slow for me is because it's taking each frame and loading the full final raw image into Blender to preview it. So if I come over here, it loads this full image at the render size, which right now it is 1920 by 1080. And you can see that here. If I hover my mouse over here, press N, and then come to the View tab, you can see proxy render size. It's using the scene render size, which is this here. Now, depending on your video, you might be able to come over here and select a lower quality proxy size, even though you're not using proxies. But you can see here, the image is now at 25% quality of our scene size, or rather maybe at 25% of the resolution. Now let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, maybe a tiny bit, but in my case, it doesn't look like it's enough to solve our problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that back to scene render size. And again, that's depending on the video. Some videos, this might help. But let's enable the cache to see how Blender is handling that and loading that in. So if you come over here to the right and you see these tabs here, if you don't see your cache tab, come up here to Edit, Preferences. Or in my case, I'm actually just going to drag this window out here a little bit and go to this icon up here and then choose Preferences. And then on your Interface tab, click Developer Extras. And now you can see we have this cache tab over here. And if we click that, you can see these options. By default, I have raw and final checked. So make sure you check those. And then we also have options that appear here in View, Show Cache. So you want to click Show Cache and then come back up to View. And then one more time up to Show Cache and then click Final Images. Okay, so in order to see that cache, let's come here and Shift B will zoom in to an area that you select. So I'm just going to do that. Control and the middle mouse and drag. If you go up and down, you can scale it that way, or left and right scales it. I'm just going to keep kind of positioning this and scaling this all the way until we can see this orange bar appear down here. So if I move my playhead, you can see a new orange bar appears every frame that I put that on. That is the cache. It's loading in that specific frame into the system cache. And if I come over here and then hit my right arrow, you can see it starts to cache in everything and leaving a trail of cache, money behind it. So now all of these images here are cached in, and if I click, you can see the playhead moves immediately. And if I click and drag, you can see it's like butter. The playhead doesn't have a hard time following that at all. But of course, if we scroll out and go to a different area that's not cached in, you can see it's having a problem again. But every frame that it stops on, it caches in a little bit more. And if I click play, you can see that it actually is caching in pretty well. Now, I'm using Blender 2.92, and they have done a lot of really good work with how Blender reads videos. And so previous versions might have been even slower than this, but this isn't too bad. Okay, so I'm going to refresh this by going to View and then Refresh All. The shortcut is Control R, and then that will clear all of our cache, and then we have to start again. Cache is also cleared if there's a change that goes on. So if I come over here and I select my footage and then K to cut, you can see that is still all cached in just fine. But you will notice one thing here is if we scroll in, you can see we have an orange line and then a brighter orange line here. And it's very subtle, but that just means that we've got some old cache and some new cache. So because we made this cut, there were some changes that happened. And so it's kind of caching on top of the cache. But if I take this handle and I click G to grab and then move, you can see immediately that all of this over here, except for where my playhead is, the cache disappears. We still have it over here because we haven't changed anything over here. And I do want to show you, let's bring this back over here, that Blender has a bit of a hard time caching in at the start of each strip for one reason or another. So if I refresh this and then come over here and then play, you can see right here, especially, now it jumps here and here, but right here, right after the start of this strip, it has a big jump. And that is all across the board. So if I come over here, press play again, you can see even though it filled in these other ones, it's still kind of hiccuped on this one. And that's just kind of the nature of cuts in Blender and how cache operates. Let's come over here and then refresh. And then you can see boom, 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 it skips over all of those. Now we can come over here and click and drag and kind of let it kind of cache in if we go slow or if we use our arrow keys to kind of do that. Be careful, if you go backwards, it's going to go a lot slower. I don't know why, or at least it has in the past. I can test that out here real quick. When you try to go back, it's doing an okay job now. But a hack that you can do is if you aren't using a proxy and you want to do faster video editing, you can, let's refresh this here. What you can do is after you make your cuts, just page up to each of the cuts. And what that does is everywhere the playhead stops, then it will cache that frame in. So now we've got all three of these cached in. Let's move back here. And now if we press play, look at that. Smooth right over those. So it's my opinion that a possible fix for this would just be to program Blender to cache in every first frame of every strip automatically. And that wouldn't take up hardly any cache memory, even if you had a lot of cuts. But that would definitely allow for a lot smoother playback for those people who aren't using proxies. They did have somewhat of a solution to this, and I'll show you that now. If I bring this over here, refresh, and then under proxy render size, we have this prefetch frames. So if I click that, you can see that instead of the cache being something that happens in the past, it now happens in the future. So it prefetches all of those frames for us. So now when we play that, it's smooth as it plays over those cuts. And then it disappears from the timeline after the playhead and then puts it on in the front over here, depending on how much cache you have set aside, which I'll get to in just a moment. But you can see if I play that here, it's recycling it from the playhead all the way to the front. Without that on, if I refresh and then play, then it's going to do the same thing, it's just in the reverse. So once it reaches the allotted amount of cache, then it's going to take it from the back and then continue to add it right after the playhead. And you can see this little trail of cache. Trail of cache. Money, 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 money. Okay, no, not that kind of cache. But unfortunately, this prefetch cache only works with very simple scenes like this, where you only have one video strip and nothing really layered. But if you got layers and if you have different effects like transitions or speed control, things like that, the prefetch frames are so slow that it's not really worth it, because you click prefetch frames, and then when you move your playhead, then the playhead plays faster than it can prefetch those frames, so it doesn't really matter anyway. So last thing before we get to proxies is the amount of cache. So if I open this back up over here, if you go to your preferences, go down to system, and then down to video sequencer, it says memory cache limit right here. And the higher this goes, obviously the more cache will be allowed. The lower, the fewer cache units are allowed. So if I click in here and divide this by 4 and then refresh, you can see that that's a shorter cache trail, and that's still prefetch frames. I'm going to uncheck that to make that an actual trail. Yeah, so just like that. You got to be careful with this though. Just make sure you know how much memory your computer is using and adjust accordingly. If it's too much, depending on your computer, it could freeze things, and depending on how many things you have open in the background, just be very careful with that. You don't really need a lot of it anyway, because you're going to be refreshing and changing things all the time. I have, I think, 16 gigabytes of memory, and I use, like you saw before, at about 4 gigabytes worth. So this is a quarter of what my system has, and it's plenty for me. You can also use the disk cache. If you click that, you can set a directory and a cache limit, and then that will save it to your physical hard drive instead of your virtual memory. But I haven't used this much. I'll let you play around with that. Instead, since use disk cache is going to your hard drive, might as well just create a proxy, which is what I'm going to show you now. I'm going to select this and go to our Proxy tab, and then select Strip Proxy and Timecode to bring up the options. And again, a proxy is a substitute video specifically designed for video editing. It will still render your original video, but for the editing process, it will use a substitute. So this is a lot smoother, a lot faster. So I'm just going to go down the list. We've got Custom Proxy Directory, which is, I use this one all the time. Actually, I use one directory for all of my tutorials and all of my proxies. It's just easier that way, so I know right away where it is. You can make a new directory for each proxy. It's entirely up to you. For this one, I'm just going to put /proxies /enter, and that's just going to put it in the same folder as my blend file and then into a proxies folder. Now you can also make it a specific file. So if you've already created a proxy and you know you want to actually maybe overwrite one or create a specific file name for it, you can do that. I just leave that unchecked. The directory is just fine for me. And then we have the resolutions. So you can click one of these, you can click all of them, or however many combination you want, and then it will create each one that you have selected. So if you wanted to create all 4 versions of proxies, it's going to create 4 different videos, one at each of these different resolutions. Now just be careful, because if you have a proxy at 100%, because it's being transcoded to work with video editing, the file size is going to be much bigger, most likely. So know what your file size of your original video is first. It can be up to 5, maybe 10 times the size of your video, depending on what it is and how Blender decides to transcode that. But the reason you might want to do it at 100% is if you have to read things such as little tiny letters or very minute details, because if you come over here to proxy at 25%, you're not going to see those details. So you might want this at 100% proxy. Or you might want all of them just in case you wanted to switch back and forth. For me, most of my tutorials, I don't need that much detail, so 25% is just fine. I'm going to uncheck overwrite, and I'll show you that in a minute. The JPEG quality, obviously the lower the quality, the smaller the file size, but then also the lower the quality, and you'll have more pixelation the lower it goes. I'll just keep that at 90. I haven't really messed with that. And then the timecode index, I don't technically know what all of these do, but it's my understanding that Blender creates all of these options for each proxy no matter what you choose. So this is more something you choose after you make the proxy, and you can switch back and forth in between those. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know and leave me a comment. So some of them run smoother than others for different types of video. Just play around with it and see what works best for your video. I'm going to leave that right now at the default. And then the last thing I'm going to do is set selected strip proxies 25% and then OK. Okay. So now we are done. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Okay, so now I'm going to click Rebuild Proxy and Timecode Indices, and you see this error message that comes up here. And I did that on purpose because I did not check overwrite. And as I'm preparing for this tutorial, I already created a proxy in this directory that has the same name as my video. But this is because I didn't check overwrite, and while I was preparing for this tutorial, I already made a proxy with the same name of the video in my Proxies folder. So let's take a look at that. All right, and then you can see here we've got the Proxies folder that I made, and then inside that, this is the title of my MP4, Frenzy Freebies promo, but it's in folder format because if you click into that folder, you can see all of these things. Here's what I was talking about with the time codes. So it creates all of these options for the time code. But then here's our actual proxy, and you can see it's labeled proxy underscore 25 because that would be 25%. If I did 50%, 75%, and 100%, it would name them accordingly underscore 50, 75, and 100. But you can see that the current proxy size here is almost 550 megabytes. Now, my original video, I believe, is about 108 megabytes. So this is roughly 5 times the amount, even though it's at 25% of the original resolution. And that's what I mean. You need to be careful with your file sizes and know how much your original is, and just know it's going to probably be a lot more, and just have enough space for that. But I'm going to, I can either delete this. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put hold here to rename that so Blender doesn't recognize that there's already a folder named that. And then I'm going to come back over here, select this strip again, and then rebuild proxy and timecode indices. And now we can see we are building the proxies. And you see I got about a couple minutes here as it builds those. So I will be back when it's finished. Okay, it's finished, and we've got a new one here that did basically just the same exact thing. I just wanted to show you what the process looked like, both if you had something here already or if you didn't have something and you had that overwrite unchecked. Okay, so now let's test it out and see what we have. So we click and drag. Oh, that didn't seem to change anything. Well, that's easy because we aren't using our proxy size, 25%, which is what we created. And now when we click and drag, look at that. Look how fast and smooth that is. It's like butter. And you can see that cache down there being loaded in as we go. But this is a lot smoother. And if we make cuts, refresh that here, and let's see what it looks like. Look, it doesn't have a problem with those cuts at all. And this is the power of the proxy. It will speed up your video editing so much, and I wish I had done this a lot sooner. I used to be really against proxies because I was like, well, why would I have Blender render a completely separate video just so that I can do editing? It just seemed like a waste of space. I was like, if I wanted to render a video, I would just render out one myself. But I couldn't, because even if I did, I wouldn't know what settings to choose in order for it to be optimal for the editing portion of this. But Blender proxies know exactly how to do it to optimize it the best way for your video editing. So why not just let Blender do it? So yeah, I was stubborn for a while, but I've learned the error of my ways, and oh my gosh, it makes such a difference when you're cutting and moving things around and layering things on top of each other. It's just this mixed with your keyboard shortcuts, the way you optimize those will save you loads of time on your video editing. Okay, so one last thing here, and that is we've only got proxies set up for these ones here, but not the initial ones. You can see that there's nothing over here. But the good news is you don't have to create a completely separate proxy. If you come over here to the strip tab, you can see that the name is Frenzy Freebies Proxy underscore promo.001. Now we already know that Frenzy Freebies underscore promo is the official name of the original footage, and then all of my cuts will have .00 whatever behind it. So this is 001, this is 002, 3, 4, so on and so forth. Now we've got 7, looks like we got 7 of them total. But just so you can see, it's not necessarily all in order. We've cut all of these in order, but if I come back over here and make a cut here, you have .001 and then you have .008. So it doesn't go in order of the strips, it goes in the order in which you make the cuts. But because these are just cuts of one video, we have already got the proxy. Because when we made a proxy for this over here, we didn't make a proxy just for that strip. And this took me the longest time to figure out. We actually made a proxy for the entire video. Because actually each one of these cuts are just copies of the entire video that are then trimmed down. So all we have to do with the rest of these is point it to the proxy that we already have. Now there's a semi-fast way to do this, and I'll show you why I say semi-fast. Let's click the one that we already have the proxy information for, and then we can press A to select all the rest of them, or shift click and drag to select however many you want. But what I can do is right click on this checkbox for strip proxy and timecode, and then choose copy to selected. And now, if I select these, they will all have enabled that strip proxy and timecode. However, it doesn't copy all of the other information. And if I try to do the same thing that we just did for each of these, like right click, oh, look at that, copy to selected is grayed out. I can't do that. Or my directory is grayed out. I can't copy that. I don't know why Blender does this. I don't know why some things I can copy to selected and some things I can't, just seemingly randomly. So if you know that answer, please leave me a comment. So we can kind of speed this up a little bit. If we hover our mouse over the directory and then press Control-C to copy that, we can come over here and then just select these and then Control-V to paste. And that saves us a little bit of time so that we don't have to find that directory each and every time, because that would be really tedious. And then I'm going to also uncheck overwrite. Now let's test it out. Oh, and it works. We don't have to create a separate proxy for each of the strips, which is really nice. One thing to note though about the proxies is that Blender looks like they're in the process of updating and changing how they operate. I don't know if it's going to change any of the actual settings, but I did see that they're working on some updates with this, so I might be coming out with another future tutorial on those updates. So there you go. With your custom key maps and with your proxies, you'll be editing like lightning speed, like a rabid wolf that would edit in Blender, I'm sure would be fast. But yes, all I'm trying to say is that's going to save you a lot of time. Let me know if it helps speed up your workflow. Leave me a comment. I'm thinking about doing some more general video editing stuff, so if there's something specific you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments, and you will see me in the next one.